Hello, welcome to the School Safety Free Period. I'm Amanda Klinger.
And I'm Dr. Amy Klinger.
And we're with the Educators School Safety Network, and haven't done this in so long that we hardly remember, but we're back.
We're back.
It's very exciting. I mean, I don't know, I'm very excited. I spent a long time just now trying to make sure that this is still streaming and recording, so hopefully you're able to see this or hear this, whether you're on YouTube or whether you listen to us as a podcast. But
last time we did a podcast, a lot of things had not happened yet that have subsequently happened.
Yes,
We got married. I stopped coloring my hair. Got a couple grandkids. All those things had not happened last time we did a podcast.
We have been very busy in terms of our professional work, in the work that we do of school safety, and then also, yes, as Dr. Klinger pointed out, there has been the inevitable passage of time. Both things have happened in the intervening time. But
Did you notice how I stopped coloring my hair as very high on the personal markers of things?
I don't know. I mean, I have new Star Wars toys in my background.
No, that's not so important. It's just these personal markers of time.
Gotcha.
So, and professionally, unfortunately, and fortunately, a lot has happened. We were doing the school safety free period with a very lighthearted, if you've listened to any of the past episodes, with sort of a look at this crazy stuff that's happening in school safety. And then Parkland happened, and it really was a very sobering sort of wake up call for lots and lots and lots of folks that, in fact, this is not something that just, happened in the past. It was something that was actually very relevant, and that made it very difficult to come back to a more lighthearted approach to school safety. But yet, in the long run, and then of course the pandemic came and we weren't having school safety per se because we weren't in school. And then now we've kind of come full circle where, we are both looking at these issues of violence in schools, but we're also looking at sort of the after effects of all of the different things that have occurred in the last couple of years that have really kind of contributed to almost a perfect storm in terms of all of the things that are going on in the world of school safety and violence prevention. And so we felt it was time to sort of restart these conversations and get us all thinking a little bit more about that really critical topic.
And we're going to keep the name School Safety Free Period because although this is really serious work and it sometimes is tragic and heartbreaking and life or death, I think there's some value in not being so intense emotionally all the time. And so we're not going to be making light of anything. We understand this is really serious. And so we'll try to keep it to a dull roar in terms of what we're making fun of. But I think it's important for this to be empowering for educators and for school leaders and for parents and for other stakeholders. I think keeping that little thread of lightheartedness, we're going to keep that. And also...
Well, and anybody who's ever been a teacher knows that your free period of the day tends to fall just like that. It tends to be about professional development a little bit. It tends to be a little bit about blowing off steam. It tends to be a little bit about housekeeping, logistical sort of things. It tends to be a little bit about collegial relationships. So that's why I think the free period is really very appropriate because it's going to be a mix of all those things.
Yeah. So we have a lot coming up in the 23-24 school year. We'll obviously be doing a deep dive talking about swatting. My gosh, Dr. Klinger and I did many media interviews about the research that we've done about swatting. So our final report for the 22-23 school year will be coming out here before we get back to school.
Because we finally got a year where we're all in school and could do some data.
A full year of data. And so obviously at that point we'll talk a lot about swatting. And I would think we probably would do a whole episode about what, folks experienced last year. And then also kind of talking a little bit about what can that look like moving forward? What can schools do? Not necessarily to prevent swatting, but to at least be prepared, to have more tools in the toolbox to be able to respond to stuff like that in a way that is appropriate, but maybe is a little bit less stressful or tough on kids.
More tools other than just sheer terror would be good.
Yeah. So we'll definitely have an upcoming episode on that. we'll have a lot of different topics that we cover. I think now's also a good time to invite you to email us questions that you want us to answer in this upcoming school year. What are questions that you have? What are topics that you wish we would either revisit, stuff that we've talked about and a lot of time has passed, or things that we haven't covered yet that you'd like us to kind of talk about and answer your questions. If you have any questions or things that you want us to really mention, you can always email us. The email is info@eschoolsafety.org. So if you can do that and send us your questions, or you can comment. If you're here on YouTube, you can comment, and we'll bring that forward in future episodes, because we really love to be able...
We're going to be so disciplined that you'll never wonder, when's the next podcast? Because it'll be right there.
Yeah, but
we're going to be so disciplined.
But we would love to be able to, we actually do, when we do in-person speaking, we actually have a lot of people that will come and say, oh, I listened to your podcast. I had this question. And so that's great. So we want to make sure that we're really being responsive to folks who have questions and that maybe we don't ever get to see in person, but that we can still answer your questions. So that's something else that we'll be doing in the future and over the course of the school year. What did you want to, I think you kind of talked about philosophically all of the things that have happened over the kind of dark period when we were not talking.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to talk about specifically in the work that we've been doing?
Well, I think this is probably old, because I'm usually several steps behind the current pop culture. But if you remember, there were all those evolution of dance videos, which are very cool, I think, that sort of showed you how dance evolved over the years. Hopefully more than one person understands that reference. But it really sort of, probably not. It really started me thinking, though, about the evolution of school safety, at least in the time period in which, we've been involved. I mean, clearly we're past the 20th anniversary of Columbine, but that sort of is the marker that sort of started the whole discussion of school safety. And for a long time, doing this work since about 2008, so for a long time, we were doing a lot of, hey, trying to get people to take this seriously. Hey, active shooter, it could happen. It could happen. There was that sense of denial that it wouldn't happen here. And so I feel like we spent a good amount of time trying to get people to take the threat of a potential active shooter seriously. Mm. Then we spent a lot of time trying to get people to do something in their active shooter response that was beyond just hide out and hope for the best. Mm. So that's really coincided with, actually shortly after that is when DHS and FEMA came out with the Run, Hide, Fight protocol for active shooters for adults, but also that was then translated into schools. So then there was that. And then I don't know what you would say was the next step, Amanda, but I think for me, the next step from that was the idea of being able to do more than just hide out and hope for the best. But then everything became so fixated on active shooter that, just like education does, we swang so far to the other side that that's all we did. And they were hyper realistic, and we have to do all kinds of things, and we have to scare teachers straight to get them to understand. And so we're going to fire blanks in the school, and we're going to simulate shootings, and we're going to have blood and people laying around. And then just before the pandemic, we really saw that real pushback starting of people going, I'm not doing that. I'm not traumatizing myself. I won't participate in training if this is what we're going to do. And along the way, we had a lot of personal experiences that really coincided with that. Professional experiences, I should say, personally, that really kind of coincided with that. And then we really sort of found ourselves going, hey, guys, do you realize there is so much more to school safety than just active shooter response? Mm-hmm. We have got violence prevention. We've got climate and culture issues. We've got threat assessment. We have got other forms of violence that take place in schools with much more regularity. And so we really got to the point where we ended up sort of on, I wouldn't say on the other side of the coin, but certainly on the other, in a very different direction of going, a kid that gets hit by a bus because we don't have adequate supervision, that death is just as much of a tragedy as a school shooting death. And that's kind of where we were when the pandemic went, and now we sort of, we're frozen in limbo at that point for a little bit.
Yeah. I think, you mentioned about the way that things happen in education in terms of those drastic swings. I think it's probably worth noting that school safety is one of the only, if not the only, work of education where you have heavy influence from outside entities. Obviously you could say that there's heavy influence from textbook companies, but textbook companies are kind of educational. I think this is, school safety specifically, that really hard turn towards ultra realistic drills, really scary, that outsized impact of active shooter response drills, and then all of the target hardening industry that came a part of it. I think that's pretty unique, and I would encourage if someone has other examples of this, but I think that's pretty unique in terms of education being so heavily influenced by security companies,
by law enforcement, by security technology companies. And then also, don't forget the whole politician sort of thing of legislation and that kind of stuff. We're not necessarily saying those things are bad, but you're right. They have had a very heavy influence on the way that school safety has gone, and not necessarily because that was the best idea, but kind of just because that's where it ended up.
Yeah. And I think, the path forward, you kind of talk about putting the risk of active shooter in its proper context and being prepared and being concerned about other types of risks and hazards. I think the path forward is twofold. It's that, what you talk about, that kind of shift in approach, but also it's that shift of getting some of this decision making back in the hands of teachers and school leaders. And that involves building capacity in those folks. And I don't mean to be critical of educators, because I was only ever a substitute teacher at most, but that, educators have sort of allowed other entities to take over a lot of this work. And it's a catch-22. Educators don't have a ton of skills and capabilities because cops have said, we're going to solve this for you. And because cops have said, we're going to solve this for you, teachers and school leaders don't have a ton of skills and capabilities in this area. And so,
we still see that now. I mean, when you think of people getting ready for back to school training, they're going, okay, we've got a new school year. What should we train about? I know, active shooter. And so we're getting ready to launch another school year with a significant number of educators who have no training on de-escalation, on how to stop large fights, on what to do with medical emergencies, what to do with non-custodial parents, all of the things that happen with much more frequency. But we're gearing up for another school year going, what we got to do? We got to do active shooter.
Okay, but I would say, part of the reason that is schools are in a catch-22 on that. What is the thing that is mandated by law typically?
Sure.
Active shooter training. So it's hard for folks to be able to, first of all, that legislation sends a message. This is the most important thing, whether it is or not. And that mandate means that then I have to do so much more to carve out time, not just to meet the legislative mandate, but then also to do the things.
But not all states have that mandate, but I think there is more of a cultural mandate as well as perhaps potentially a legislative one.
Right, but when things
parents are saying, "What are you going to train?" We want active shooter training.
Sure, but when things are mandated legislatively, it's for active shooter drills and fire drills. What you're talking about of, do we have the capability to communicate if the roof is ripped off this building? That's never mandated by any legislation, and I understand. I'm not saying that it should, but that is a difficult thing that educators have to contend with in terms of, carving out time and prioritizing. So,
and so I think that this scenario you're describing of where we are right now would have been the case with or without the pandemic.
Absolutely.
But now we have that extra layer on top of it of kids who are in mental health crises, large in many cases, who have been isolated, who we've severed so many of the relationships of school and, the relationships within that community. And so we've got, kind of unprecedented rates of social isolation, mental health problems, all kinds of issues within families and communities, lots of divisiveness. So it's sort of like you already had this baseline problem, this overemphasis on school shootings. And now you've heaped on top of it a whole bunch of other factors that complicate any of the work of school safety, whether it's, traditional active shooter training or the things that we would advocate for more, which would be a comprehensive all hazards kind of approach.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we can't do those things like it's 2020.
Right.
We need to do those things knowing full well the weight of and the consequences of what's happened in the past few years.
Yeah.
So I think that really makes resources like this even more important, because we need to examine other perspectives. We need to understand what's really happening out in the field. We cannot just stare at our own navels and go, well, must be fine here. We have to really sort of have an outward looking, but also have some really kind of uncomfortable conversations where we may have to challenge some of the assumptions we've had.
Yeah. I think all of the ones that you hit in terms of the impact of the pandemic, spot on. And I think one I would like to add is I think a real challenge that we're seeing schools, coming back from, serious pandemic protocols, is getting back just into the good habits of school safety. From your personal life, everyone knows from their personal life how difficult it is to build and maintain good habits. And schools, even schools that had really good school safety, habits before the pandemic, those fell by the wayside. All of the time and energy and effort that would have been spent on school safety got sucked up, dealing with the global pandemic. And then when schools came back, they were getting back into the groove, getting back into the habits of like normal school stuff. And I think, unfortunately, school safety, the work of the ongoing all hazards, comprehensive work of school safety, unfortunately falls typically more towards the bottom of that list, of that to-do list of getting back into the habit of things. Until something bad happens. And we've worked with a lot of, prior clients that we've come back and we've worked with them after the pandemic because they saw something bad happen at a neighboring district or a neighboring school and thought, oh gosh, right, we have to get back into good habits about this before something bad happens. And so I think that to me is, I think, one of the biggest impacts of the pandemic on school safety is just how people got out of the habit of it, and there's schools that are still trying to get back into good habits.
If you look at the 22-23 school year as sort of a marker, right, of quote unquote back to normal, if that's a thing, but more traditional type schools, we saw so much, especially in the fall of 22, of people just scrambling, being like caught completely unprepared for things that were happening 2 years before, but they just got out of the habit of responding. I mean, caught completely, oh no, there was a weapon in my school, or oh no, we had a bomb threat, or, we had so many panic sort of calls of people in the fall of 22. And I understand that, but there's also, you sort of have to go, what did you think was going to happen when you isolated these kids for 2 solid years? And then brought them back in? Did you think they were going to be fine? Did you, so I think that marker of what we saw in this 22-23 school year really brings it home. And I think the report that we're going to do is really going to shed some light on what schools experienced in the 22-23 school year.
Yeah. I think, we talked a lot about what we've been doing in the past. I think I would like to, for my part, talk about just a couple of quick reminders for people as they're going back to school and that back to school PD, to make sure that they're able to kind of really advocate for work that makes sense for their school. That if you are a teacher and the PD is ultra realistic and ultra scary and we're firing blanks, to be able to, we have a lot of resources on our website talking about the value of some of those, and that, to make sure that you can reasonably stake the position that there's a lot of space between we're doing nothing at all to prepare for active shooter and we're going to fire blanks and scare the crap out of people. There's a lot of room in between that for professional development that's appropriate for students, but also that's appropriate for faculty and staff. We've done a lot of debriefing with places that experience swatting incidents. There's a lot that can be done just in terms of communication protocols. It is not at all scary or intimidating or traumatizing to go, can I really hear the communication here in my room? Do I really have cell phone service? Do I have a radio? Am I supposed to? What is the official way that I'm going to get information in an emergency, and an emergency broadly defined? That kind of skill building and practice and just test runs of those things, they're not at all scary, they're not at all traumatizing, but those capabilities are valuable whether the incident is not that dangerous at all or whether it's a terrible life or death situation. Having those things under your belt are really valuable. And I think that's something that, teachers and parents and community members can advocate for. Are we doing skill building with our people, or are we just going through the motions of the scariest thing possible? Because there's a lot to be done that doesn't have to be scary or traumatizing at all. That's kind of always my friendly reminder. I have a lot of friends who are teachers, and they dread back to school, I'm sure, but then they also will text me about their dread of back to school safety training, and it's so awful, and they're doing this, and it's so scary. And that's not kind of always my pep talk that I send to my friends who are teachers, of there's a lot that can be done that doesn't have to be traumatic at all, and that will prepare you and will make you and your students safer.
Well, and it does tend to fall. Professional development at the beginning of the year sometimes does, especially related to safety, does tend to fall into either of those extremes that you described. Either it's so scary and hyper realistic that everyone shuts down, or it is so nonsensical, boring, sort of like Bueller, read the crisis plan, any
watch
question.
The video, click through the videos.
Yeah, as opposed to an honest collegial discussion of what would we do? What do I need? What's my situation? What are some strategies? What are some tools in the toolbox? We really aren't doing much with the toolbox. And I think you're going to hear that analogy a lot as we move through
Unless
these
we come
podcasts.
Up with something better. Yeah, I mean, that's the best one we have.
I like tools in the toolbox.
I think it's pretty apt.
But I think the big takeaway from this whole discussion is that what we want to do as we continue through these series of podcasts is not just admire the problem, but the good news is there's so much that we can do, and we can do it in tiny pieces. It does not have to be, I'm sitting in my school going, well, I can't get anyone else to listen about school safety, so therefore, screw it. I'm just going to live with what we have and cross my fingers and hope nothing happens. That's absolutely not the case. There's a lot of things that individuals can do. There's a lot of things we're going to talk about that are strategies and capabilities and skills, perspectives, as you've talked about, of thinking about school safety in a different way, but also a lot of common sense kind of hands-on things where we're going to, if we just do one thing differently, that's better than just throwing up our hands and giving up. So I think as you come back, hopefully, to listen to more episodes, we're going to work on that in every episode, trying to give you some strategies and some perspectives that you can use in your classroom or in your school, but wherever your sphere of influence takes you, that it will be able to help your professional practice.
Yeah. And I'm gonna kick off with a hot tip right away. And if you have one, you can go after. Mine would be, so I talked about kind of philosophically that there's a lot that can be done. So here's one. If you are a teacher and you're heading back to school and all of the school safety training seems really scary and intense, here's a thing that you can do by yourself or with your colleagues if people are interested, which is to go on an evacuation, like field trip scavenger hunt, which is where are all of the exits to my building, because I probably just walk from here to there, and I maybe walk my kids to specials, or I have these little deer paths that I walk through the building, especially if you're going back to a building that you've been in for years and years. So I would encourage you to go on a little scavenger hunt, find all of the exits. And there might be things that would surprise you of, oh, this is really accessible, or, oh, I didn't realize that I could go through here and then could leave this way. And that's a really valuable, I think it's a life skill to know the exits of any place that you are, but specifically, in your place where you work. Do you have a hot tip like that? It's okay if you don't.
But you're just going to get mad because I use this one and it makes me sound very old. But I guess mine would be, as you walk into your new classroom or your existing classroom to set it up for the upcoming school year, please don't look at Teacher Pinterest and go, here's what I need to do. I need to have a million things hanging everywhere and this and that. Look at your classroom from a functionality standpoint of, can we all move quickly out of our evacuation exits? We go into so many classrooms where the door that goes into the hallway, that's your primary route for escape for any event, is blocked by cubbies and mailboxes and all kinds of things that look so cute on Pinterest, but provide a choke point and make it very difficult for kids to move in and out, for us to rapidly exit that room. So, looking at what potential evacuation exits you have, whether you have an exterior door and another door, but not blocking those, making those accessible, and even looking at the way you set up the desks and the other things in your room. Can kids move freely? Can we move people out? And I know there's limitations. Classrooms are small, you got a lot of kids in them, but really starting out with that point of, I need to be able to move kids quickly in and out, and then decorate and set things up from there.
I think that's good. I think that's a good one. That's a good one for especially this time of year. So not overdo it.
Yeah. So yeah.
Well,
it's like, what's that thing? You're supposed to get dressed and then take off 2 things. Okay, set up your room and then take down 2 things, probably.
I don't know that that's like a universal rule. Get dressed and then take off 2 things.
No,
that could end up being real inappropriate, I think.
No. It's something with like accessories.
Oh,
like
if you problem with over accessories.
Get dressed, and then I can't remember who said it. Somebody famous. You can tell how much I don't know about fashion, but somebody said that once you get all dressed, and then you're supposed to take off 2 accessories. And so once you get your room set up, you may want to take down 2 accessories.
Gotcha. Okay. I did not know
Next podcast, I'll figure out who it was. Or better yet, email us and tell us who it was.
I don't know that anyone said that, but I am curious to find out.
It might have been Helen Gurley Brown, but I'm not sure.
Okay. So email us your fashion advice and about to take off your accessories.
No. I don't want any. There's no point in wasting your time giving me fashion advice. I only want to know who said that to prove that I was right.
Email the answers to our questions. Email us questions you'd like us to answer, probably more importantly. Again, the email is info@eschoolsafety.org. Also, the website is just eschoolsafety.org. We have tons of resources up there. Stuff is getting updated all the time, especially now that we're getting back to school. If you have any questions that you want us to answer on the podcast or just privately, shoot us an email and we will be back pretty soon.